Before I continue, I emphasize one Kasoma Farouk of Uganda's idea, believe that you can. At a time, even when the waves are so large, believe that you do what? You can. So we are saying today, we are going to look at the early life of people of Canada and USA before colonialism. We are saying the great country called USA at one time was colonized by Britain. It took great citizens like George Washington to fight for America's independence. That's why a great city is called Washington, D.C. To remember a great man, George Washington. So we are saying today, there is a life before colonialism. Before the coming of the colonialists, the Americans had some kind of life. For example, the Native American societies were often organized into tribes with each had its own what? Leader. So we are saying today, the Native American societies were organized into tribes, but each tribe had its own leader, selected based on wisdom and experience. The leader had to be selected based on wisdom and experience. They could not just choose a leader, but they were choosing a leader based on wisdom and what? Experience. This makes us believe that America as a country was so much built on wisdom and experience. That's why one of the leaders of America, Franklin Roosevelt, said, people should fear to fear. In other words, you cannot separate wisdom with American society. So a leader was chosen based on wisdom and what? Experience. Another one, in most Native societies, children belonged to the clan of their mothers. We are saying today, children belonged to the clan of their mothers. It is not like in Africa, where in America at one time, children belonged to the clan of their mothers. The Native American tribes were organized into social structure, often based on kinship, with different groups divided into smaller units like clans. So the clan system, before the coming of colonialism in America, was so much valued. Many tribes practice seasonal migration, moving in different areas based on the availability of food sources. In a bid to look for food, they used to migrate from one area to another, looking for food. Another one, the clan groups played a central role in organization. For example, they dictated the marriage role. They could dictate who was supposed to marry who in the society. So in other words, the clan used to dictate marriage. In other words, they could choose husbands to the women. To the what? To the women. Another one, many tribes relied on hunting, fishing, gathering wild plants. We are saying today, many tribes relied on hunting and even fishing. This was done to make sure that great clans live a society, live a life, good life. In other words, they relied on fishing, gathering wild plants. That's how they lived before the coming of the colonialists. We are saying today, complex relationship existed between different tribes, including alliances, conflicts over territory. Different societies could fight and others make alliances as they were fighting over territories. In other words, they could ally with one group against the other. And at one time, they could attack other societies in order to take over the territory. Another one, the rules within a tribe often were defined by age, gender. We are saying today the rules were defined by age, even gender. In other words, in some societies, some people were so much valued and became leaders because of their age. Because of their what? Their age. Even gender, men were so much honored over women at one time. Then some tribes, especially southeastern and Great Lakes, carried out farming. They grew maize and potatoes. We are saying today, some tribes grew maize and what? Potatoes. This was done to sustain their clans and groups. They grew maize and what? Potatoes. This was done to sustain the different groups anyway. Then prior to the coming of the colonialists, and the European explorers, the indigenous people participated in trade. We are saying, as the societies grew, the indigenous people started participating in trade. My friend, societies cannot grow when people are not carrying out economic activities. So we are saying today, some societies use to deal in trade. The game was, they wanted to make societies grow from one level to another what? Level. Another one, the native people had spirituality, often in animism. There are those people that believed in animism as a religion. I can tell you, these were traditional religions before the coming of the what? The colonialists. But as the colonialists came, we are seeing different people adopting different culture. But before coming of the colonialists, some believed in what? Animism. Another one, we are saying today, the native, they use the oral tradition in passing down history, laws and cultural values. They use the oral tradition to pass history from one generation to the other. Oral tradition, where the elders could preach out, could tell people how other societies used to behave. Another one, the Native Americans practiced diverse ceremonies. Like at the time of harvest, they could celebrate at the time of what? Harvest. Even death ceremonies, they could organize death ceremonies. This was done by the Americans before the coming of the what? The colonialists. Changes rising up here. Even initiation ceremonies, people to graduate from one stage to another, they could organize what? Ceremonies. Another one, indigenous people had a rich and a variety of art like a pottery. They believed in a variety of art like a pottery, like what? Pottery. Many people use it to participate in pottery. Change is rising up, my friend. Variety of things were formed out of tools and weapons like knives and axes. This was done because the societies were still traditional. They developed indigenous transportation technologies. As time moved on, they developed indigenous transportation technologies. But as the societies grew, things had to change. So you need to understand